Devion.
And this is Chetch. You're listening to the Buddy Pass, where three friends from China share travel stories and talk to Black people who are thriving in unconventional places.
And on today's show, we have Alani Gray. Not gonna go into who, where, what, when, and why about Alani Gray. I'm gonna allow Alani to do that herself because she does have a phenomenal story. Because that's all we tell on this show.
This
our
is true.
phenomenal,
This is true.
our phenomenal, awesome stories.
That's why we show up.
We're really good at this.
We're really good at this, or we try to be. So Alani, what's up?
Hey, hi. How you doing?
Good. Yo, we've been trying for what? Almost a month and a half now to get you on the show, but you've been so busy in New York doing fashion shows and shit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What?
Yeah. Boss.
Yeah, just a couple of things, But you've been busy too, right? DC, hanging out, having meetings, yeah?
Been very busy.
I haven't been on a runway, so I think we should say who Alani is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Who are you?
I didn't know that.
So my name is Alani Gray. I currently live in Columbus, Ohio, but I am a health educator. I have a lot of other interests, so sometimes that includes styling or production assistant for photo shoots, fashion shows, other events, things like that. I also work with my cousin in putting together events for women, and I'm working on getting the cultural plug set up. So that's just a space where I share about people, places, and things of different cultures or different experiences I have, and just kind of enlightening others about people. So yeah, that's me.
That's really dope.
I feel like you missed something really big. Do we have to say it?
Oh yes. Oh gosh.
So why do we ask you on this show?
Why are you here, Alani? Tell us.
Oh, because I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I lived in Ethiopia for 2 years and 4 months. And now I'm back in the States, living as a returned Peace Corps volunteer. So, boom. Yeah.
Cool.
Traveled extensively as well, right? How many countries have you traveled to?
It's probably about 12 or 13, I believe. Last time I counted.
That's impressive. That's pretty good.
I know.
Thank you.
Yeah. When did you first start getting in the travel game?
So I actually first started traveling when I was 2. My family is from Bermuda, and that was my first plane trip. That was where we went to Bermuda for Christmas to see my aunts and cousins. And so ever since then, traveled a lot around the States with my family, friends. And then in college, I did service trips to various cities in the States to, do some good work. And then I decided, well, I kind of need to do more of that. And I applied for the Peace Corps and ended up in Ethiopia.
That's really dope.
Peace Corps? Because again, I think we've talked about this. Not many people know that this is still a program that exists, and it's not a program that's very promoted within the Black community. Right.
So actually, it was a coworker from my summer service program, Freedom Schools, and summer was ending. I didn't really know what I was doing after that. I knew I would get a job, in social services or something, but he was just like, oh, you should look into the Peace Corps. So I was like, oh, Peace Corps. I looked it up. I read everything about it. And I was like, this sounds like me. Like, I would love this. Like, I've always wanted to live in a different country. I always wanted to have a different type of lifestyle. I wanted to learn a language, and not just in a class, but where I really needed to speak to other people and learn those cute little nuances or phrases that you would only know if you're living there. And I really also just wanted to help people. So when I had a list and I was checking it off, Peace Corps just sounded good. Plus, it was paying for everything too. So I really didn't have to.
There you go.
I really didn't have to come out of pocket.
All right, facts.
And I have been looking at other service programs, and they were like for a couple of weeks or a month. It wasn't anything that was really long term. And so I think that's kind of what sold me also, is that I felt like, okay, I'll be there for a long time and I'll really get to immerse myself and like experience for myself and not just a quick trip as some of the other trips I have had.
Mm.
So what is the everyday of the Peace Corps? Like, everyone's experience is obviously different, but what was yours?
Stylish, fashionable.
No.
And wait,
Everyone else is
Ethiopia.
everyone else is dirty every day, and Alani just comes out pristine.
Of
Hair done,
course. Of course.
teeth
Tell us-
glistening.
Tell us more about where exactly you were. Ethiopia is a huge country. So we're in the city, were you in a suburb, in the countryside, and how did that make a difference in your experience?
So I was in northern Tigray, which is northern Ethiopia, and I lived in a town called Rukomarai. It was 20 minutes away from Aksum, and Aksum is really an ancient, religious, historical tourist site.
Cool.
So a lot of tourists come there, but it's also considered a holy site. But where I lived was more semi-rural, so it wasn't necessarily in the country or in the rural, and it wasn't too far away from a city in a sense. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. But if I did want Wi-Fi or other treats like chocolate sometimes, I would have to travel to Aksum. So that kind of made a difference. My day to day, so I was woken up by chickens and oftentimes the mosque. So my house was like a 1-minute walk from the church, and that would start singing around 5 a.m. And it was very loud, so that woke me up.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And so when I first moved there, I was like, this sucks. This is annoying.
Is that the words that you really used, or is it like a few? This shit sucks. Like just
no, I was just like, oh my God, I need to listen to music, or can't they turn that off? Why are they doing this? I would complain for at least every morning. I would wake up, and then I was just like, all right, well, if God is waking me up at this time, I guess I better start doing something.
It's like, yo, these foreigners are really messing up my beauty sleep. Like, I really need these people to get with the program.
But
they praise God too much. God is not even
Do they not know Americans are here in their country? They gotta.
I didn't say any of that.
They gotta get it together.
I feel you though. There have been so many mornings in the Middle East, and Ethiopia is obviously in Africa, but in the Middle East where I was woken up by a mosque, and like it like never gets old. It is always shocking. No. It happens in the middle of the night. It happens early in the morning. I was just talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and I was like, what is that in the back? It was super early morning for him, like 2 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
Like,
they waking up at 2 a.m?
He was at a wedding.
To pray.
Yeah, it's like.
And so I just thought, like, okay, maybe I should pray too.
I mean, everybody else is. You know what I'm saying?
I was like, let me do something productive.
So wait, so when do they sleep? So they wake up at 2 a.m, and then they go back to sleep and wake up at like 9, like.
Yeah, it would be a priest, and then sometimes it was closer to 4 or 5, and then most people really started waking up when the sun came up, which would be around 6. So that was kind of how the day started, and then you would hear the mini buses getting ready to pick people up and take people to work in Aksum. So they're coming down the street all loud with Ethiopian music or Amharic music. And then I would make breakfast, or I would go to Bunabet, get my coffee for the day, and just make my rounds. What?
What's Bunabet?
Oh, it's a coffee house. So it's a place.
Oh, dope.
People. So that's Ethiopian Starbucks. So that's what I did. And then I would walk to the office. It was great. My office wasn't too far from my house. I walked everywhere. So that kept me in shape, and I lost maybe 10, 15 pounds while I was living there.
Okay.
I would check into the office, my host organization, see what they needed me to do, hang out. A lot of my time was just spent talking to people in my town, and I think that's where I got a lot of connection, that connection piece that I really crave as a person. That happened for me doing that informally, and I did a lot of my teaching that way too. So they would ask me questions about America, they would ask me questions about what I'm doing, and so it was a really easy way for me to practice my language skills and also just do cultural exchange.
And so what was your job? What were you teaching?
My job was a community health educator. So I talked about STI prevention, HIV prevention, maternal child health, nutrition, gender equality rights or gender equality issues.
That's tough.
Those are the type of things. So for me, being a Black woman from America, that gave me a lot of privilege, mostly because I was from America, right? So being a Westerner, that gave me a lot of privilege to talk about taboo topics, and talk to men about it, not only to the women, but men, just about trying to change their mindsets about what's going on, or even how they treat some of my women friends, and maybe like, hey, how about you clean up the house one day, or how about you cook dinner, or things like that.
Let's not be crazy. Let's slow down.
I know, it's like, can we end this?
And it's like sometimes you just gotta respect the culture as it is.
You know what I'm saying? Like traditions.
You can't go in there trying to change things.
You know what I'm saying?
I didn't just barge in there, but if they asked me, I would say, yeah, it's nice when a man would do this for a woman, instead of the woman always having to do X, Y, Z, and then some.
All right, LD, Devion, y'all heard that, right?
No,
y'all taking notes, right?
The recording went out. I didn't. We lost all of that.
That'll give you some points. I'm telling you. Be a little considerate.
So you mentioned that you, being a Black woman, gave you that privilege. What was it about that specifically, and how did that compare to maybe a non-Black volunteer who went in and tried to have similar conversations?
Well, I don't think it was about me being Black. I think it was just the fact that I was from America, so I was Western. I think being a Black woman posed some different things. I mean, it was often seen that I was Ethiopian if I had my hair braided a certain way, and if I was by myself, people thought I was Ethiopian. But for me, I didn't like that while I was there. I was like, hey, I want to be seen as an American Black woman because that's what I am. And that's when I became very strong in identifying my ethnicity, identifying my nationality, because it was important to me for local Ethiopians to know that Black people exist in America, and that is where we come from. When you think about our history, that's so complex and so much trauma and anger rooted in that. And it was unfortunate that, here I am in Africa thinking that I'll be embraced, or that this wouldn't be an issue to talk about, and it is, because although I'm Black, I'm still not seen as Ethiopian. I'm seen as something else. So a lot of times I was debating my nationality. I would have my passport, and people would be like, "You're not American. What else are you?" And I'm like, "I'm American. Let's just leave it at that."
You're breaking up just a little bit.
Why is this so hard?
Alani, you're breaking up just a little.
Hello?
Oh, great.
Okay, sorry.
So the moment you said, I'm American, can we leave it at that?
All of that, your passport. Yeah.
All of that became like static from Mars.
Okay.
So you can, it was great. You can repeat it so we can hear it again.
So I really wanted people to know that I was American. There are times where I'm in the airport in Aksum, and people would talk to me and they would say, "Oh, where are you from?" "I'm American. Here's my, I have my passport." And they're debating me about where I'm from. And so I would say I would want them to know that I'm American because I'm Black, and just going through that history of slavery and how a lot of Black people don't know their exact roots. Whereas if you're Ethiopian, you can go back to your grandfather's, great-grandfather's, grandfather's, and that's kind of how it goes. And so the pressing of that question about where I'm from is kind of rude, and that could cause a lot of trauma for Black people traveling, because we don't all have those answers.
Yeah. For you, are both of your parents from Bermuda, or one of your parents are from Bermuda?
My mom is from Bermuda, and so and that becomes another thing, because my grandfather is white. So her father is Scottish or Irish, Scottish and Irish, and then her mother, my grandmother, is West Indian. So we're not exactly sure where she comes from exactly, but we know that they met in Bermuda and fell in love, and it was a good relationship between them, and they birthed 3 daughters, my aunt Nell, my aunt Di, and my mom. And so unfortunately my grandmother passed away during my mother's birth. So so that, some of her history isn't always there either. But my father is from Ohio. And we still don't know all the roots in terms of where my family comes from in that sense. So in general, I am mixed in a sense, but when it comes to other Black people who may travel to Ethiopia and doesn't have that background or that story, that could really be hurtful to have that conversation. If someone brings that up, that could turn them off from wanting to travel and really getting to know the people of Ethiopia in that way, if it's like a semi-urban rural town. So I was the first foreigner to live in Rukomarai, and so that was another thing. So they're asking me questions that they haven't gotten to ask anybody, and so I know they're probably just like, let me ask you this, let me ask you that.
Right.
So I was kind of that guinea pig, but still, it's really important to kind of tell our truth and just let people know that, hey, try not to ask Black people these questions when you see them if they're from America, because that could bring up a lot of emotions that they may not be ready for.
Right, fair.
That's good to know.
Yeah. No, I would imagine that probably each one of us has had a similar experience in some regard. It's just a heavy question to address, and I've often seen it where I would get in arguments with like African friends who can like spit that answer out really quickly, and I'll have a conversation with a buddy, and he's like, dude, you can always go back, or you can always find out like which country you're from. And I'm like, dude, it's not that easy.
Yeah, like, you really can.
You can, and it's you have like ancestry and DNA and all that stuff out there, 1, 2, 3 or something like that out there.
Like, I don't want companies collecting my DNA.
Yeah, I don't want white companies collecting my DNA.
Just say it.
And telling me where I'm from. That's one part of it, but it's also like, I think to your point, Alani, it's like there needs to be a degree of understanding why Black Americans don't want to engage in that conversation, and why it's incredibly painful. It's Church, like you can go right to Nigeria, right, and it's like grandfather, grandmother, like your whole, exactly. That's so powerful, and I'm glad that a lot of us have that. But for those of us that don't, engaging in that conversation, as you mentioned, can be incredibly traumatic. And I don't think there's enough people, enough Black folk within the diaspora that really understands how painful that conversation is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd also say that it's not, I wouldn't say it's super simple for first generationers like me either,
Right.
There's not the trauma of slavery, at least as far as I would know, for people connected with my own family. But what I think is fascinating about Black people all over the world is that there is this kind of statelessness for those who are in the diaspora. For a lot of people in the diaspora, and a bit of floating and trying to figure out, okay, I'm a bit from here, maybe a bit from there. I'm in a new culture now. Which one can I claim as my own, right? And having to, I think, kind of take a defiant stance of like, this is just where I am. This is who I am. So I wouldn't say that it's. I think that it's complicated also in different ways. For those who are very actively and knowingly living between multiple cultures.
Sure.
Okay. No, I'm just trying to. I was just trying to find a way to segue. Yeah, like how do you segue into that?
Your dad's from Ohio, and that's where you live right now, right?
Yes, that is where I live right now. Yes. That is where I live right now. So my grandparents grew up. Well, my grandmother grew up here, and then my grandfather came from Buffalo, Syracuse, New York area. And so really I just have information about those two, my grandfather and my grandmother, and a little bit about my great-grandmother. But keeping those records, I think, or just having that oral history passed down and having those conversations with your family is really important, and working on those. And sometimes that isn't always disclosed, or you don't really know how to ask those questions like, okay, well, where is so-and-so from, and how did so-and-so get here? Just because, again, there could be some heavy emotions tied to it, I think. And I think with the new Ancestry and 123, they can be good resources. It just depends on how you want to use them. And even to your point, Leroy, if you do find out you're from a certain country or certain tribe or culture, going back to that place, it's like, how do you build those connections? How do you build those relationships where you feel that now this is something that you're a part of? So I think there's a lot of complexities about where you come from, where you grow up, and the culture that's kind of passed down to you from your families. So even though I went to Bermuda younger a couple of times, I went back as soon as I came back from Ethiopia, and it meant so much more to me being there with my aunts, being there with my cousins, from being in Ethiopia and just seeing the impact of those family connections and how people are really family oriented in Ethiopia. That's a big part of the culture, but just realizing that these connections tell me something about myself. These relationships tell me something about my past, and asking those questions like, okay, what did my grandfather do? Where did he come from? What about his family? Where are his connections? That type of thing. So I've been asking more of those questions as a result of those questions being asked to me, even though they brought up a lot of different feelings and made me question, like, what is my identity? How do I identify? So that was something that was kind of transformative for me in a way, just realizing, so I'm a light-skinned Black woman with green eyes, and so I come off as mixed or fair or sometimes ambiguous, and to a point, that was something that I enjoyed when people said, like, oh, you're so exotic, and I'm like, oh, okay, but now it's like, I want to let people know, like, you could be Black and be on the spectrum, and that's okay. It's not, Black people don't all look the same or act the same, and that was one thing too. So a lot of representations of Black people came from media or just American people, and kids in my town we're watching Sweet 16 from MTV. So
love that show. I want the car.
You would, of course. Of course.
I always love the quinceañera ones. I was like, you guys are doing it. I saw a post about a quinceañera for a dog. Like, someone. Wow.
Stop it.
Like, I love life. Thank you.
You know what? On that thought of representation, I was like,
it's like, yeah, let's move on.
I think you touched on something that's interesting. I think you touched on something that's interesting. So I was sharing with Chesh today. I came across some doing a bit of research, and I came across some stats. So there are 5 million Black millennial travelers in the U.S. And last year alone, we spent $68 billion on travel.
Awesome.
But you wouldn't notice that through like traditional travel agencies and ads and campaigns. There are no Black and brown faces that are like
5 million people spend $68 billion on travel alone.
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Who are these people?
Hold up.
They're us.
Hold up.
They're us.
Did you do the math on that? That's like 12.
They are us.
Are we tabulating?
They are us. Hey, listen.
All I'm saying is that I need more and or better or richer friends. Like that's
you know what I'm saying?
They're peers. So they showed it. It's the Mandela research. I'll send y'all a link. It was tiers of it, right? There are certain Black folk who will spend a bit more. Oh shoot, we lost Alani.
Well, this is awkward.
Hold on, let me get her back.
This is awkward for everybody.
We lost her.
Oh hi, Alani, what happened?
But yeah, I'm gonna drop it while we're calling her back in. I'm gonna drop it in there, y'all. I was shocked too. But I've seen that.
That's a lot of money. Hold up, 5 million.
I'm just like, what else do our bank accounts look like? Like, what's happening?
That means every Black spent $13,600. That's $13,600 a piece.
Yeah, show me the receipts.
Let me find this link, y'all.
What? 13,000.
Well, think about it, bro. How much was your cost to Tanzania?
It wasn't.
What? What are you talking about?
I had to put. Yeah, that's not even 4.
No.
So the second study in a series of documenting the impact of African American travelers demonstrates their growing contribution to the United States travel and tourism economy to the tune of $63 billion in 2018.
63.
How many Black people are on this planet?
5. Wait, what? Okay, hold up. So you said 63 billion.
So this report says 63 billion, but there was a CNN article that says 68.
Man, CNN be lying. They be lying their asses off. Let me see something. Divided by 5 million. Right?
Only 5 million? It can't be.
Hold on.
63 billion. That's $12,600.
So
I've never spent that much on a trip. Maybe that just means I'm broke and other folk out there are just killing the game.
Yeah, where are you? What is that? That's got to be counting like insurance. Hey, she's back.
Hey, guess who's back?
Hey.
Hi.
Can you hear me without my headphones?
Yeah.
We
can.
Great. Yes.
My phone died, so.
You're a bit staticky though.
You're a little choppy right now though. That's the only thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Louder, but still a little static.
Is that better?
That's better.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. So I know we spent African American travelers spent $63 billion last year on travel alone.
That's $12,600 per person.
So I don't know.
That is bananas.
Cash me out.
I don't know. So I know that there are 5 million Black millennial travelers religiously through the U.S.
Millennials.
Millennials. I don't know if that
student loan debt.
But think about it. Real.
That's where all Sally Mae's money is.
I know. That $12,000 going to where? Prague?
You going to Iceland, but you can't take these. But you can't make this payment on the 15th. Okay, I see how it is. Sally Mae,
we ain't got it.
Something like I ain't got it. Sally Mae need to get on Instagram. That's where she gonna find her money. Sally Mae gonna find her money on Instagram. That's where the money is.
Sally ain't got it. But I'll catch you in Thailand.
Exactly. You riding elephants in Chile, but you can't take care of this payment on the 28th. Okay, I see how it is.
But you got this huge market, right? Of clearly it's like a huge market, $63 billion. But you wouldn't notice that if you looked at traditional travel ads and campaigns where they typically depict, white Western travelers exploring the world. And now to address that, you have brands like Travel Noir and No Madness, and that are pushing out positive images of Black people abroad. Alani, you have a couple thousand followers on Instagram, and you're really big into fashion, and it feels like you've sort of integrated that into your travels. Is that purposeful, or are you like trying to promote Black images abroad?
Yes, I'm just trying to promote Black positivity, Black images abroad, because Black people are doing amazing things, and oftentimes we're not represented in that way. And so, in the same way that I was trying to represent a different narrative for us in Ethiopia to my colleagues and friends. And that's what I'm doing now, just here in Columbus, just here in the United States. And even when I go abroad again, it's just important to show that Black people are powerful and intelligent and creative, despite all the odds that a Black person experiences in any culture or the diaspora. When you think about it, most people of darker skin are oppressed in some way, and it's just important to kind of highlight the good things about us.
Mm. That's what's up. That's what's up. So tell us. So you're famous on Instagram. Like you're Insta famous.
Hey.
All right. Why? Well, I mean,
I've always say all of that.
Don't be modest.
Yeah. Like, own it.
Aloni, how can we even find you on Instagram? I mean, we'll get to that, but I'm also like.
But what made you decide? Why did you pick that platform as opposed to like Twitter or Facebook or something like that?
Because I'm a visual person. I like seeing things, and I just like seeing pretty things or pretty people or interesting things. I like learning about what's happening in different parts of the world. And I think when you get a visual with a story, with a narrative, that is impactful, right? A lot of times when we see things with our eyes, when we see, if we're driving down the street and we see a person on the road and, they're begging for money or something like that, seeing them in that state pulls at us. And like I said, I'm a health educator, so I work with adults who have substance abuse issues, and I see people at their worst state, and seeing that is impactful, and it brings about my compassion to want to help them and get, be a support to them. And that's the same thing with Black people and traveling and doing things outside of the box and really putting it out there in a tangible way, like, hey, I'm doing this, or hey, these Black women are doing this, or hey, this Black man is a designer and all of his models are Black from the Black diaspora. The show I worked on was very Black, and I felt so grateful and inspired to have even been a small part of it. I just came in and helped, really. I was just helping dress models and put things together. I didn't have any other part in it, but just my small part in being there was impactful to see all these amazing, talented, skilled, passionate, critical Black people in this field. And so we're in that field, and I see that across the board. So whenever I see a Black person or even a brown person or a person that's been marginalized and they're advocating for themselves, or they're inventing something new, or they're just trying to be a positive source for people, that's what I want to highlight. That's what I want to uplift, because that's what we need. It's a lot of negative things, a lot of problems. And those things are in our heads all the time. Black people and violence, when we hear about a new shooting and it's a cop or it's a Black person and we see those images daily and they're just viral. And that's what you see. We need to see positive things that can make us realize that there's hope, and that won't be our reality, or that isn't the reality for friends of ours or family members or acquaintances. Like, we really need to see those positive images of us, of Black people in the diaspora, doing great things.
And was that something that you've always felt, or was that something that kind of evolved in you as you traveled?
You know, it's always been a part of me. Before I went to Peace Corps, I was working at a homeless shelter for family or women and children. It was the YWCA Family Shelter, and you know, that was very eye-opening too. I'm seeing people at their most vulnerable moment, whether that's due to systems or certain relationships, or, you know, just they're part of the system now. I've just always had a heart for helping people, and that's where I've been. So, and my mom could tell you as a young child, like, I wanted to, like, give away my sandwiches and things like that. And I
Wow.
You're just
I volunteered at the library.
Oh, gosh.
That is so
Yeah,
adorable.
I wouldn't say that.
Nobody wants your sandwiches, Alani.
So they won't take your lunch
I
money.
kind of want to eat
You
it
get them a
myself.
sandwich and they won't take your lunch money. Preemptive measures. I like it.
No, I volunteered at the library as a young girl. I was in Girl Scouts. I've just always wanted to help others in whatever fashion. And that's kind of why my career has been so broad, because I used to work in childcare, or I did after school programming for urban kids. And that's just been me. So it's kind of tugs at my heart a lot of times, and I'm trying hard not to internalize it, but I try to find places that I can go and be meaningful and have an impact. And even if that's just listening to someone vent, or giving them words of encouragement, or educating them and saying, hey, like, use a condom or go get tested, then that makes me feel good that I'm trying to put some good things out in the world and help others be better.
Okay.
And are you working in health education now that you're back in Columbus? What are you up to?
Yes, and that has been a roundabout way. So right now,
Okay.
I am a health educator at an organization that provides treatment services for adults in recovery. I go to different agencies and I talk about STIs, HIV prevention, Narcan, which is a medication that helps reduce overdoses from fentanyl or opioids. And I get out that education, that awareness right now.
Okay. Has your time abroad and your experiences abroad, has that really helped the way you present these health issues to adults now?
Yes, I'm really just flexible about how I go about things, and I have a little bit more patience. And I just realized I don't always have to have a lot of materials to get my message across. You know, that's something that you learn in Peace Corps.
Yeah.
You may not have electricity, but okay, you better schedule a group during daytime, or you may not have paper, so how else are you going to do this? Or you may not have markers or Wi-Fi. How else are you going to get your point across? So it helped me be a little bit more creative. It helped me be a little bit more personal. It helped me communicate my ideas a little bit better, and just think outside of the box when those things weren't present.
Okay. Do you think people from different backgrounds and different cultures, because I would imagine that, you know, you would service people from all walks of life, from all different, you know, countries, ethnicities, or whatever. Do you notice that some cultures are more receptive to health education and sex education than others?
Yes. Some cultures are more receptive. I think ones that are a little bit more westernized. And then I think younger generations are more receptive versus older generations of cultures. So that's my answer.
My immediate thought was like, oh, the people who are no longer having sex are like, we don't want to talk about this anymore.
Hey man,
And that can go across
you
the
would
board,
think,
right?
hey, you would think, but
That's
I actually
universal.
heard, but you would think that was the case, but I heard that like STIs are like running rampant in these senior homes. They
Yes.
are running
So-
rampant because these old folks is out here fucking like they are in these streets, man, or they are in these hallways, I should say.
Oh my
but,
god.
yo,
So yes, they,
Walker
that
be
is-
damn. They
yeah, Walker, be damned.
it's true.
Yeah,
It's true. They are our second high risk age group, 55 and up.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't contract. Yeah.
The kids are out the house. The kids out the house. They're like,
Right.
we got to die anyway, like next week. So let me just.
Or it's like, hey, I literally can't get pregnant, so why worry about STIs?
Yeah.
So
Right?
just
Yeah.
shoot it up, man. Shoot the club up. Just
Oh my
just-
gosh.
just go crazy. Yeah, whatever. You
Lionel. Okay, we know what your mind is.
What's up,
He's like,
Coretta?
"Hey,
Trying to
what's
get
on
this too?
55?"
Come on
He
over.
said, what's up, Coretta?
Yeah.
Oh my
Hey,
god.
Granddaddy Viagra. I'm
You know what
about
I'm
to get it
saying?
in.
I was just waiting for the day where people stop asking him to use a condom. He's like, just wait. Just wait.
Of course.
We don't need these anymore.
What's up? Jebediah got some new Jebediah's here. Yeah, come on, bring him in too. Everybody's getting it. So
Y'all gonna make me.
Oh.
So it makes
Oh
me
my
have a different
gosh.
mindset when I talk with my grandma tomorrow. Like, grandma,
Yeah, you better.
be safe,
Let her
grandma.
know what's up.
Be safe.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up, Granny.
'Cause these dudes out here carrying.
they do not care. They don't care.
Even old Frank.
Oh my gosh, they don't. They really don't.
Oh man. So Alani, how long have you been back in the States?
I've been back since May 2016.
Okay, so 3 years. 3 years. Do you feel like you fully like transitioned back? I spoke with a few people and they're like, dude, it takes me a year, 2 years to like fully acclimate myself back to Western culture, specifically here in the States. So how are you feeling? And what was that transition like for you?
So I traveled a little bit before I came home, maybe about a month and a half. So I had some time to get acclimated to Western culture, but I would say that was a culture shock in a sense, being on my own and like just experiencing different countries outside of Ethiopia. So I lived in Ethiopia exactly for those 2 years and 4 months. I didn't leave the country once I got there. So I think that makes my experience a little different. Yeah.
That's not the norm. That right? Many people travel during for experience.
Right. I traveled more so around Ethiopia versus leaving and coming back. So I think that made my experience a little bit different. And so when I came home, it was really easy at first for me to just fall right back into my friend group, fall right back into the things I like doing. I would make funny comments here and there or try to shake people's hands in the way that we greet each other in Ethiopia. So that was interesting on my first interview doing that. But
don't rush past that. Don't rush past.
That's
let's
so
unpack
funny.
that real quick.
Yes, please tell us more.
And
Like,
how
wow,
did you
she
get the
is
job?
straight off the boat. What is she doing right now?
they're like, okay. And I was just like, oh crap. But it turned out everything went well in terms of that job. But I would say
what is Ethiopian handshake? I'm sorry.
So you shake their hand just like you would a person in English, I guess, in America, right? With the right. But you also go in and you like hug their shoulder a little bit. And so it's kind of like almost like, hey man, what's up?
Yeah, that's why I was like, oh, I know that one.
Or you'll hold their forearm a little bit. So that's another thing too. So you'll shake their hand with
interview?
one. Yes.
So they were like,
know.
you
What I
need to
did.
back the hell
Where do you
up.
even go from there?
Right? It's like,
Well,
really,
that was a
like,
great
you really want this
segue.
job.
Yeah.
It was a great segue into what I did in Ethiopia. It was actually a job called Local Matters. which is a nonprofit that goes around to schools and teaches kids about nutrition and eating healthier, how to make meals with less, and just treating your body a little bit better, the vitamins that you need, how to grow things. So it was very Peace Corps type of job that I had that was kind of like part-time. So it worked out. But yeah, I just kind of went through transitions in terms of work. I had a job and it was kind of hard for me to get acclimated to it for a while. So it took me a roundabout way to get to where I am now. And I feel really good about my job now. So I tried a couple of things and I was like, I don't really like this. This isn't working for me. People are a little too concerned about materials, or people are a little bit too ungrateful, or it's like, yo, this is not that serious. Like, let's just relax a little bit. Everything is going to be okay. Like I said, like Ethiopia taught me a lot of patience. And so I think just coming back home, I felt the hostility already. I felt the tension, and it put me on edge sometimes, and then other times I was like, yo, like this doesn't really matter that much. So that
so what are you talking about specifically there? I mean, you're coming back in 2016, so I have an idea of what you're saying, but what exactly were you experiencing?
So when I worked with kids at an after-school program, and so a lot of times they were just very high-strung and like, why don't we have this? Where's our snacks? Like, yo, what's up with your shoes? Why are you acting like that? Like, just very
petty
American kids.
What's up with your shoes? Oh, wow.
What are those?
Okay.
I would be so mad if somebody did that to me.
I know. Like, my shoes are
just the other kids, and I'm like, okay, why aren't y'all just? So it took me a while to relate to them. I think when I was back in my town, all the kids loved me and would like scream my name when I'm walking through the streets. They always wanted to play with me, and it was really easy for me to work with them in terms of getting my education out. And so I think coming back home, I didn't really think that would have been an issue with working with kids again, and that was something that I wanted to do because I like working with kids. So that transition and just the area that I was working in is very urban and a lot of issues in that community. So that was something that I didn't expect to feel so intensely. So that's why it was a little bit hostile, and just feeling that tension of what parents were going through and working with parents, or the resistance that the parents gave me. So that was something that was
and
different.
I mean, what you were doing was talking about like healthier diets.
Healthier diets and working at an after-school program. So getting kids to do their homework and
parents were like, oh hell no, I don't want your sandwiches. Like, is that what we
Yeah, you're right. Something like that. Right. So they were like, who's this girl coming in here telling us that, like, hey, let's try to be on time for things? Or they were just kind of, I was new to them, and they were new to me. And I think a lot when they found out about, where I had been or what I had been doing, I think that was intimidating or made them feel some type of way, like, what is she doing here or something. So just trying to build that basis of connecting with them. I think it didn't happen as fast as some people wanted it to. So that kind of took a turn. So that's why I say it was a little bit difficult transitioning into workspaces. I think I felt like there was some grace in Peace Corps in terms of work environments, even though work environments were difficult there too. I think it was just there was a little bit more support in Peace Corps with that.
And so how did you find your way to what you're doing right now? Because as you described it, it's like what you really care about. You feel really connected to it, right?
Right. I do feel really connected to it. So I applied to this job actually when I first came home, but they were going through some management transitions and things like that. So the position was taken off, and then I was called maybe I want to say around May of last year or around April of last year, and just asked if I was still interested. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still interested. And so went through the whole interview process, and now I have the job, and it's something that I do really care about. I'm trying to expand it more to more vulnerable communities, not just adults with substance use issues. So working on that and trying to make it more out of the box is something that I'm working on too.
All right.
Beautiful gowns.
No, Lionel, were you about to say something?
No. I thought somebody else had another question.
I did. I don't know if we touched on this, but I think each of us have sort of spoken on the challenge of connecting with those close to you when you come back home. And how they may not necessarily understand your experiences, or I've always framed it as they don't know what questions to ask. Ask these very shallow questions like, hey, like if you spent as you mentioned, Lonnie, you stayed in Ethiopia the entire time, like 2 years, 4 months, like didn't even come home for a visit, nothing like that.
No,
and so to do that and then to come back home and your family and friends like ask these very shallow questions like, hey, how was the food? How was like what type of clothes? Like I was away for 2.5 years, and all you have to ask me is like, how was the food? Like what the fuck? Like you can't think of any other question with a bit more substance, you know?
Well, some people be like, yo, I thought you was dead. When I got back, it's like, oh, you still alive? Oh,
it was so like to your. As you say, you sort of go in your bubble. I was so like irritated and frustrated by family and friends who just, and sometimes I felt like they didn't care or they didn't have the attention span to like really engage me in a deep conversation around that experience.
Yeah.
And it could cause you like just push them to the side and like you will search for a community and a lot of times that community is just strangers who've also had similar travel experiences.
Right. So I think with that, my cousin and best friends, I maintained really great contact with them. So I communicated with them a lot about what was going on while I was there. So they had a gist of things that I had experienced or were experiencing. And then it was really helpful that my cousin Alicia, love her, she came out to visit me. So she came out to visit me 3 months before I was leaving. And just her coming there, oh my gosh, it really energized me. And she could understand a lot of the things that I was going through, even from the short time that I was there. And so her support was strengthened due to her visit. So she really saw where I lived. She saw where I worked. She met my friends, my people, and knew like the whole process of getting a minibus, all of those things that become very stressful.
Key experience.
Very key. So that was very helpful. But I think when I got back home, it just felt, I didn't want to feel pretentious. I didn't want to talk about my experience in every other sentence. When I was in Ethiopia, and I would joke about it on Twitter, like, hashtag now I'm here. I'm going to talk about, when I was in Ethiopia, I did this. When I was in Ethiopia. And there were times that I would bring up certain things, but a lot of times I just felt the need to hold it to myself because I didn't want to make my friends around me feel awkward or feel
which sucks.
Sucks. Yeah, and I've just recently I've been talking about my experience more this year actually, and I think a lot of things I was still processing. I experienced a lot over there, 3 birthdays and some other things, but very transformative. So
I was like, okay.
Mysterious, but all right, we'll move
So
on
I
from that.
think let's just leave it at that.
Do you have like a
Exactly.
second family somewhere?
Yeah.
I think so,
So I
maybe.
killed a guy, and
Just kidding. Spill the beans. Spill the beans.
So I think just now processing that whole experience and who it's made me, I think I'm really able to see that more clearly now, and just talking about it a little bit more in a way that is productive, I think. So there, and not so emotional. I was very emotional when I returned, and a lot of things still sat really heavy with me. So I think now I'm able to just see a little clearly and really articulate the things that I experienced, how I feel, and show my experience in the best light. And like Leroy said, yeah, some people would ask me some deeper questions, and then I could just tell they were fading. And I'm like, okay, so what movie do you want to see?
Yeah.
This conversation's not going anywhere, is it? Yeah, it's not.
Right, yeah, like, next.
Okay, so what was the heavy stuff that you felt like you carried back to America, and then you've had these years of releasing?
Oh, so I was in my first emergency. I was in a car accident in Ethiopia. So that was something that happened. Got my stitches for the first time. No medication, no anything like that. And at the time, my father was also in the hospital. So I didn't really want to reach out to my parents and say, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Right.
Because it was just something that I knew I could get through on my own, and just handle it. So that was something that was very heavy for me to experience. And then, and that happened, I want to say 2015. And like I said, I came home May 2016. So, 6 months had already passed, or 7 months, and now I'm back home. And so they weren't there with me to go through that or anything. So that was one thing for sure. And just experiencing friendships and relationships. So being away from home for so long, you want to find those people that you can cling to. And sometimes you just forget who you are. You forget your independence. You forget parts of yourself. And you want to cling to people who are familiar to you, or who can speak the same language as you. So I think sometimes certain relationships form that don't really need to form, or they're more intense than they should be. And that kind of impacted me in a way.
Speaking of relationships, do you now, like, with all the travel that you've done, like over your whole life, like, is that something that you are looking for if you're trying to like start like a romantic relationship, as far as like connecting with people? Because I've noticed, and this is just coming from me, because I've noticed, well, because we've all been around the block, and so I feel like we can. I mean, like literally, like we've been around, like we've traveled. We've traveled, so it's like I feel like y'all can like like y'all can understand where I'm coming from. Y'all, us. We've all been around the world. We've all like done things. Please, guys, please. This is me. But I feel like y'all can understand my situation. Like, if I'm talking to somebody and they have never traveled, I won't instantly just be like, oh well, this is the end of this. But like, it is something that like sticks out in my mind. You know what I'm saying? So, but like I said, it's not like I'm gonna be like, oh, get away from me, peasant. But like, it will, like,
your words, not ours.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, the pores have gotten into my vicinity. Like, it won't be like that. It's not like that. But it is something that you really make a note of, right? So I was just wondering if is it just me? Am I bougie? Or is it? Please tell me that you guys also feel like this.
I think it's more so about the motivation. So if I meet a person, usually they're attracted or interested in my travels. So that's something that's brought up, or maybe that is a common interest at first. But I think if it's not common interest at first and we meet on for other reasons or other common interests, then I think it's about the motivation or just wanting to explore the world, wanting to do things differently, wanting to have different experiences. That matters. It's not necessarily that your passport book is all stamped up, because, then where are we going to go together if you've been everywhere?
I'm gonna be real though.
Like, okay,
I feel like
right?
for me, you gotta have a stamp or two in your passport book. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I need someone that's cultured, or at least attempting to get cultured.
Wow.
Like,
but getting cultured doesn't mean you necessarily have to travel. It could be just about your interest. So that's why it's about their interest and their motivation, or what they actually like. Because I know a lot of people who travel and they just go to a resort. No shade, but and that might be their intention, to just have a peaceful, restful vacation. But for me, it's like, I want to be around people. I want to learn about the language. I want to be in the midst of the community, or in the midst of the culture.
Oh, I had some names. There was a name that was about to slip out of my mouth, but I brought it back.
Right.
Because,
don't do that. Don't do that.
Because I'm a man of God, and I do not want.
And then
there's
lots of people who are involved in organizations in their city that provide them that cultural balance, or that cultural information, or maybe they read a lot, or they're just interested in other cultures. So it's not necessarily about physically traveling, although that gives you a totally different experience, but at the same time, it's about that interest.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like what you're talking about is just like curiosity. Like, are you a curious person? Are you engaged in the world? Yeah, because I'm like trying to make this as vague as possible in case she ever listens.
In case that certain someone listens to this episode one day.
Hear that, fellas? You don't have to travel, but you do need a library card. You do need to read. I'm gonna need you to read something.
Not trying to turn off any prospects.
Yes. You don't have to travel, but read. Like, please.
No, but I want to travel. I want you to travel with me. I need a vacation soon. My birthday's coming up.
Oh. Okay. Well, there you go.
You heard it here first.
Exactly. We're accepting applications.
That's gonna come out.
Now, for real though, I know someone who has traveled to like almost every country in Africa, and is still like the most local South Carolina country entity that I have ever met. And it like defies all expectation. Like, they've seen so much more of this world than I really could have thought of. And yet is still out there eating squirrels and feeding it to people. Like, and like squirrels.
I don't think we were expecting that. I don't think that was a surprise.
So yeah, be curious, fellas. Read your books.
Read your books. There you go.
Oh Lord. Get your stamps, ladies. Get your stamps, ladies.
But like, books are a bit cheaper.
Yo, the library's free.
The library's free. And then there's Libby. You know, if you have
I use that app.
You could download it, Libby.
If y'all don't know what Libby is, it's a way to get free audiobooks on your phone through your local library.
Really? What's it called? Libby? I've actually never heard that.
EBY. And like Kindle.
You learned something new today.
Exactly. And if Libby's out there listening, just you know, if you want to keep these conversations going,
Libby, come find me out there. Aloni, I see that you're followed on Instagram by like one of my favorite rappers right now, Frank Walln. Do you know him in person?
Who?
Frank Walln. He's Lakota from maybe South Dakota or North Dakota.
She doesn't know who follows her. She just knows that she got mad followers.
Oh, yes.
See, that's crazy.
Yes, I do.
She's like, you know what? I don't even look at my followers.
I don't even look at my followers.
Okay, stop.
I don't have time for that. You know what I'm saying? But
Okay,
they just
tell me
follow
how
me.
you know
What?
Frank Wong and like how he
What?
can become
I'll
my best.
follow you, Lionel. I'll follow you. What?
Who
Tell
follows
me
me?
more about
Say it
how.
one more time, please.
Hold on, which one? No, I was gonna say, tell me how you know Frank Wong because I really want him to be my best friend.
Oh, okay. So,
Oh, they go back.
So actually, I know him. One of my close friends is his partner, and so that's how I know. That's how I first heard of him. And he actually came to Ohio State for an Indigenous Peoples celebration around the middle of November, and so I went in support and listened to his story and listened to his music. He's so incredibly talented, and just he doesn't hold back any punches. So, and I love that about him. Like, it's a room full. There's mostly white people in this room, and he remixed Redman from Peter Pan, and he just goes in on
the Redman.
Yeah,
it's so good. If y'all got,
it's so good.
So good.
It's so good, and so that's really how I know him. And again, so he sheds light on what the Native American experience is, and sometimes we forget about that also. And so I really appreciate him and his voice, and just the access that he's giving to other Native Americans to speak up, and the platform that he's giving to them, especially through music. So once again, that creativity and using it as a way of expression to let people know what's going on, and also in a way to better himself. So that's his platform, and living his life and getting to travel around the States and spread his good word. So that's
what's up.
Yeah, that's how I know him.
I definitely contribute to his Patreon because I love it.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Is his partner black?
No, she is Filipino.
Damn.
Whoa.
But I say that because she's very. Yeah, let's not do that. She is.
No. I'm just saying. I was like, oh man,
yeah.
Is there hope for us? For me, us being.
Girl, give him my number.
Sorry, girl. Sorry. I probably shouldn't even be talking about that. But
okay, don't add that part.
This feels like a DM conversation.
I had to ask.
I think we should nip.
Yeah.
Anyway, love his music. I really love what he's doing.
Wow. Yeah. Just wrap it up. We're just gonna wrap it up. Leave it.
All right. Sorry. Yeah. Maybe we have to cut some parts out about that. Okay.
That won't go into it.
Well, this is awkward. This is awkward. Getting a little uncomfortable right now, actually.
Okay. Who's doing the editing? Because you got a lot to get out.
This is definitely going in the final cut.
Oh gosh.
Why is it so hot in here? It's gotten hot.
Who's hot? Are you? What's going on over there?
Nelly just walked in like,
It's getting a little uncomfortable. So I'm saying.
Oh boy.
So what were we talking about? Partners and traveling the world. Yes. I think that's something that is very vital to a relationship. But it's like Church said, it's more so about being curious and wanting to travel and wanting to have different types of experiences. And the one thing I say about reading books and really finding out about what's going on in your city is because that's what the cultural plug is about. So that's kind of what I'm working on to just here in Columbus, is really talking about cultural activities, experiences that are going on in Columbus. So if you want to learn about a different culture, a different ethnicity, or a different religion, there are places to go. There are things you can do to get that access. You don't necessarily have to travel if that's something that you're not interested in. Because when you travel, there's a lot of things to think about. Logistics, time, sitting in a plane for long hours, not being able to shower. Yeah, it's just so much that you have to think about when you travel, and that can be intimidating for people, and that can kind of ruin the experience if they're not thinking of the bigger picture. So it's really good to kind of seek out cultural organizations in your own city if you want different experiences, or go to festivals and try to have conversations, being genuine and not asking like untactful, that's not a word, but asking brash questions. Just try to be genuine and compassionate when you're going out there, I guess.
And is the Cultural Plug, is it a website?
So it's an Instagram right now, but Instagram won't reset my password.
What?
They be tripping sometimes. They be tripping. Get Mark.
It's going under.
They always holding us back.
It's under.
They be throwing out passwords to the Russians, but can't give you a password.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, let's get this together. But I'm working on revamping it soon, so just be on the lookout. But that is something that I'm interested in, is just creating that awareness for people.
So that's one way we can get us connect with you. So what are other ways that people can connect with you? Like, how can people find you?
Yes, how do we submit our applications to?
You know
what I'm saying, for this
Alani?
Vacation.
Oh, okay.
That we're,
listen up, fellas.
We're giving you time to get your writing materials done.
You need someone to take your pictures when you travel. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of brothers out there.
Exactly.
With iPhones that are ready to do the work.
With the iPhone 11, right?
Yeah.
Well, damn, wait. It just came out. Give us a minute.
Or like a Canon, right? Canon, Nikon. Well, my Instagram, I can be reached at my Instagram. It is Anomaly Gray. ANOMALY GRAY.
They're gonna be good for you.
Do you respond to the DMs? Do you respond to the DMs?
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Do you respond to the DMs? What's that inbox looking like?
Yo, it would be hilarious if for this episode we just noticed that everybody just listened to the last 20 minutes. It's like, yo, we got like 50,000 downloads of like the last 5 minutes of this show.
40,000 of them are dudes.
Right. Exactly. I'm like,
this is weird.
I can't disclose that information.
Oh, I love it. 55 plus, like, my time is
They coming for Alani. Like,
okay, so on Instagram,
maybe not.
Gray.
Yes, Anomaly Gray. Say that one more time.
GRAY or GREY?
AY. Like
because that's what they was asking. Wait, is that an E?
Is that an E or an
A? She said
A.
A.
International.
She gonna say it again. I hope she's gonna say it again.
Nah, man. It's an A. AY. A. Okay, cool. Yo, I found her.
Other than Instagram, anywhere else where we might stalk you a little bit and see what's going on?
No, that's it. Just hit me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on my stories and whatnot.
Okay.
All right. Any final thoughts before we close it out? Any final thoughts for the listeners? What you got for us?
Any final thoughts?
You got a message for kids?
Yeah. So go get tested. Everybody needs to know their status. I'm not playing about
That's
that.
Real, though.
That
is real.
So, use protection if you're not with a mutually monogamous partner. And then also, if you're interested in traveling or seeking out other cultures, just take the time to do the work and figure out what's best for you. Peace Corps worked for me at that time. It may be another opportunity for you, but don't be discouraged or be afraid. Things will happen, but you can persevere just like I have. It's a marathon. Shout out to Nipsey. And that's
What's your next travel move?
My next travel move, that's what I'm thinking about this birthday vacation. So I haven't really decided just yet. what's going on. Kind of just taking it easy, and that's okay too. Just because you travel a lot at one point in your life, it's okay to sit down and not travel all the time either. So just do what's best for you, really.
Yeah.
Well, when those applications come out, just let us know and we'll blast everything.
Exactly.
We'll blast that. Yeah, we'll add it.
I'll definitely
We'll add it to the show notes.
Buddy Pass. The Buddy Pass will definitely get a lot of ratings with that. Like, oh, okay, that's what they mean with that.
So this was the most listened to podcast.
The most listened to podcast.
The last 20 minutes, though. It's very weird.
Probably Guinness Book of Records.
Yeah.
Yo, Alani, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Great.
Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It was a joy to talk to you all. Hope I helped.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Yeah.
There are gonna be some brothers out there happy when this show come out.
Our ratings, thank you. Our ratings, thank you.
We're already one so.
We appreciate you, though.
Have a wonderful night in Central Time Zone.
Yeah. Enjoy the party tonight.
Yes. Please do.
Okay, yeah. That's what I'm doing.
We're like, what's next? What's happening?
Right, I'm
All
like,
discombobulated. Forgot I had a whole party to go to. All right, yo.
Good night.
Good night. All right.
Bye.